In making a speech, one must study 3 points. First, the means of producing persuasion. Second, the language. Third, the proper arrangement of the various parts of the speech. Politicians also have no leisure, because they are always aiming at something beyond political life itself. Power and glory or happiness. He who hath many friends hath none. Poetry is finer and more philosophical than history, for poetry expresses the universal, and history only the particular. Bashfulness is an ornament to youth, but a reproach to old age. We must no more ask whether the soul and body are one than ask whether the wax and the figure impressed on it are one. Democracy arises out of the notion that those who are equal in any respect are equal in all respects. Because men are equally free, they claim to be absolutely equal. Courage is a mean with regard to fear and confidence. Men create gods after their own image, not only with regard to their form, but with regard to their mode of life. Friendship is essentially a partnership. Men are swayed more by fear than by reverence. The virtue of justice consists in moderation, as regulated by wisdom. The poet, being an imitator like a painter or any other artist, must of necessity imitate one of 3 objects: things as they were or are, things as they are said or thought to be, or things as they ought to be. The vehicle of expression is language, either current terms or, it may be, rare words or metaphors. Those who excel in virtue have the best right of all to rebel, but then they are of all men the least inclined to do so. A sense is what has the power of receiving into itself the sensible forms of things without the matter, in the way in which a piece of wax takes on the impress of a signet ring without the iron or gold. No excellent soul is exempt from a mixture of madness. Misfortune shows those who are not really friends. A statement is persuasive and credible either because it is directly self-evident or because it appears to be proved from other statements that are so. It is not once nor twice, but times without number that the same ideas make their appearance in the world. Piety requires us to honor truth above our friends, for as the eyes of bats are to the blaze of day, so is the reason in our soul to the things which are by nature most evident of all. Of all the varieties of virtues, liberalism is the most beloved. It is clearly better that property should be private, but the use of it common, and the special business of the legislator is to create in men this benevolent disposition. The gods too are fond of a joke. Rhetoric may be defined as the faculty of observing in any given case the available means of persuasion. This is not a function of any other art. All virtue is summed up in dealing justly. No one loves the man whom he fears. The true and the approximately true are apprehended by the same faculty. It may also be noted that men have a sufficient natural instinct for what is true, and usually do arrive at the truth. Hence the man who makes a good guess at truth is likely to make a good guess at probabilities. No notice is taken of a little evil, but when it increases it strikes the eye. We praise a man who feels angry on the right grounds, and against the right persons, and also in the right manner at the right moment, and for the right length of time. No one would choose a friendless existence on condition of having all the other things in the world. Bad men are full of repentance. A tragedy is a representation of an action that is whole and complete, and of a certain magnitude. A whole is what has a beginning and middle and end. Men acquire a particular quality by constantly acting in a particular way. Nature does nothing in vain. Bring your desires down to your present means. Increase them only when your increased means permit. The generality of men are naturally apt to be swayed by fear rather than reverence, and to refrain from evil rather because of the punishment that it brings than because of its own foulness. The eyes of some persons are large, others small, and others of a moderate size. The last mentioned are the best, and some eyes are projecting, some deep-set and some moderate, and those which are deep-set have the most acute vision in all animals. The middle position is a sign of the best disposition. It is unbecoming for young men to utter maxims. Therefore, the good of man must be the end of the science of politics. Different men seek after happiness in different ways and by different means, and so make for themselves different modes of life and forms of government. The young are permanently in a state resembling intoxication. Our judgments when we are pleased and friendly are not the same as when we are pained and hostile. Most people would rather give than get affection. In constructing the plot and working it out with the proper diction, the poet should place the scene as far as possible before his eyes. In this way, seeing everything with the utmost vividness, as if he were a spectator of the action, he will discover what is in keeping with it, and be most unlikely to overlook inconsistencies. Some animals utter a loud cry, some are silent, and others have a voice, which in some cases may be expressed by a word. In others, it cannot. There are also noisy animals and silent animals, musical and unmusical kinds, but they are mostly noisy about the breeding season. Man is the only animal capable of reasoning, though many others possess the faculty of memory and instruction in common with him. We are not angry with people we fear or respect. As long as we fear or respect them, you cannot be afraid of a person and also at the same time angry with him. Thou wilt find rest from vain fancies if thou dost every act in life as though it were thy last. The beginning of reform is not so much to equalize property as to train the noble sort of natures not to desire more, and to prevent the lower from getting more. Inferiors revolt in order that they may be equal, and equals that they may be superior. Such is the state of mind which creates revolutions. Homer has taught all other poets the art of telling lies skillfully. Whether if soul did not exist, time would exist or not, is a question that may fairly be asked, for if there cannot be someone to count, there cannot be anything that can be counted, so that evidently there cannot be number, for number is either what has been or what can be counted. Persuasion is clearly a sort of demonstration, since we are most fully persuaded when we consider a thing to have been demonstrated. What the statesman is most anxious to produce is a certain moral character in his fellow citizens, namely a disposition to virtue and the performance of virtuous actions. Hence poetry is something more philosophic and of graver import than history, since its statements are rather of the nature of universals, whereas those of history are singulars. To attain any assured knowledge about the soul is one of the most difficult things in the world. Excellence, then, is a state concerned with choice, lying at a mean relative to us, this being determined by reason and in the way in which the man of practical wisdom would determine it. Temperance is a mean with regard to pleasures, for though we love both the truth and our friends, piety requires us to honor the truth first. Law is mind without reason. A constitution is the arrangement of magistracies in a state. Long-lived persons have one or two lines which extend through the whole hand. Short-lived persons have two lines not extending through the whole hand. What the statesman is most anxious to produce is a certain moral character in his fellow citizens, namely a disposition to virtue and the performance of virtuous actions. Some kinds of animals burrow in the ground, others do not. Some animals are nocturnal, as the owl and the bat. Others use the hours of daylight. There are tame animals and wild animals. Man and the mule are always tame. The leopard and the wolf are invariably wild. And others, as the elephant, are easily tamed. Every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and choice, is thought to aim at some good, and for this reason the good has rightly been declared to be that at which all things aim. It is Homer who has chiefly taught other poets the art of telling lies skillfully.